Now, would you logically believe then, just, as an average Joe Six-Pack, why then were these people who are described in the Bible as already being artificers in brass and iron? They had metallurgical technology, and this guy was an instructor of metallurgy. Why would you expect that those people then, on the other side of the flood, would have a technology any less advanced than we have in the world today, when they had 3 times longer to develop it than we've had from Columbus to the present time? Now, when you add to that a couple of other factors, let's take a look at the British Museum and the Cairo Museum. They both have batteries in those museums that they have dug out of archaeological digs. Batteries, boys and girls. Batteries. Electricity. In ancient times, they had batteries, which tells us they had electricity. What were they using it for? Now, the other day, somebody wrote a letter in here, and I'll comment on this letter and probably do a series of programs on it, but he asked the question, he said, if Jesus existed, notice the words, if Jesus existed, not when, but if, why don't we have more monuments? Why don't we have more secular records, from Josephus or from the Romans or from the Greeks or somebody else? I mean, a guy that feeds 5,000 people surely should have been written up in the local newspaper of his day. He did it 3 times. A guy that walks on water and raises people from the dead, and Jesus did that 3 times. Surely ought to make some kind of mention in some local paper that ought to have been, inscribed someplace, and we ought to have some secular record of him. Well, let me ask you this question in response. For 250 years, we have had Egyptian hieroglyphics, Irish ogham writing, Phoenician coins, Roman pottery, Norse burial mounds found in West Virginia, Georgia, Michigan, Arkansas, Illinois, Iowa, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Colorado, and I never heard a word about it, and that's in the last 250 years. And now we have the teletype and satellites, and most of you have not heard of those finds. Why in the hell would you expect to hear about Jesus 2,000 years ago, when you haven't heard about Roman pottery in Brazil, discovered, and, by the way, hidden by the Brazilian government because it would embarrass the academic community? In other words, hide the truth for political or religious or economic reasons. That's why you haven't heard about it in secular history, because it has been sanitized. Just like those monuments over here that I mentioned in the last program. I said I was traveling with my wife over here in Illinois, and she said, would you like to see these pyramids? And I said, pyramids? I looked at her like, pyramids? Pyramids in Illinois? Pyramids in Illinois? I almost felt like saying, lady, where is your brain? Pyramids are in Egypt. Pyramids are in Guatemala. Pyramids are in Mexico City. Pyramids in Illinois? And she said, yeah, there's about 7 or 8 here. And I've been to them. I've seen them. She was from Illinois. She knew about them. I said, yeah, let me go look at it. Boys and girls, if you've never heard of these pyramids over here in Illinois, you got to go look at them. It's 400 feet high. It's shaped just like a pyramid in Egypt. And it's 1/2 acre in size at the top of it. I climbed to the top of it. I walked the 400 feet up to the top. It's a state park. I looked at this and I said, now why in the hell haven't I heard about this? I went to public school. And it's because it's sanitized. It does not fit in with the theory of evolution. It doesn't fit in with the political control of the people of America, or indeed the people of the world. Now, religion controls people through their belief system. Governments are doing the same thing. They always have. They don't want you to know anything about your ancient past. That would lead you to the Bible. If you read the Bible and compared that with what we see today, the physical evidence that we see today, you would come to the conclusion that the Grand Canyon came from Noah's flood. Didn't come from evolution. That's a conclusion that you would arrive at without having been propagandized. And you'd come to that conclusion just by your 6 senses, your 5 senses. Women have a 6th sense. You just come to that conclusion based upon reason, logic, and common sense, based upon the facts that are presented. But now, if we could hold the facts back from you, if we could keep certain facts away from you, then we could continue to propagandize you, we could continue to control you. And as we learn more about the Iraq War and the lies that led up with it, you see how the problem the government has in controlling the people and their belief and their support for the war, it is totally eroded. George Bush is totally discredited. Just totally discredited. I wouldn't believe him if he told me he was going to the bathroom. Now, Barry Fell has discovered, not that it wasn't always there, the evidence had been around for 250 years, but he started putting it together, and he formed a group called the Epigraphic Society. It was for the express purpose of putting this information together, putting it in print. It's in the underground press. You're not going to read about this in the New York Times. You won't see this in the major newspapers. You won't read about this in USA Today, and it isn't going to be reported in any of the major colleges or on the news media. But it's available. I mean, the evidence is there, and the pictures are there, and the books are written. I mean, they're not in your college libraries. Which you ought to ask the question, why isn't it in our college library? You're not supposed to know this. That's the bottom line. You're not supposed to know, but I'm going to tell you. Now let's go back here to the epilogue. The cup and ring is a man-made stereotype motif engraved or pecked into rock, and it is composed of a central cup surrounded by one or more concentric rings. Petroglyphs of this type occur in many parts of the Old World as well as in both North and South America and on various oceanic islands. Although their meaning has been discussed since 1859 when Sir J. Gardner Wilkinson drew attention to British examples, no certain conclusions have been reached. Their occasional association with megaliths and stone circles has been held to imply a religious significance, and it has also been suggested that they may have served as markers for early mining activities, since large numbers of examples are known from regions where metallic ores occur, and a calendric use has also been suggested. The example illustrated opposite in the upper illustration was originally found near Canton, Georgia, but has since been removed for safer conservation to the campus of the Reinhardt College in Waleska, Georgia. An article on the American examples written by British authority on the subject, Ronald W. B. Morris, appears in Volume 17, published in 1988, of the Epigraphic Society's occasional publications. The age of American examples cannot as yet be determined, but Morris states that the oldest example in the British Isles is believed to be at New Grange in Ireland, occurring in a megalithic tomb built around 3200 BC. The Reinhardt College example was photographed by Bart B. Henson. Petroglyphs of this kind may be among America's oldest legacies of visits by people from the Old World. Most archaeologists have sought to explain these petroglyphs as merely examples of independent invention. That explanation, if such it is to be termed, cannot apply to the next case, which is illustrated in the lower photograph in the opposite column. Cuneiform tablets of baked clay and of Mesopotamian origin have from time to time turned up in America, and they have been explained as being specimens brought here in modern times by collectors who supposedly then lost them here in America. However, in an article published in Volume 15 of the Epigraphic Society's occasional publications, hereinafter referred to by the acronym ESOP, Dr. Alberto Marini recorded a late Sumerian cuneiform inscription from Bolivia, cut on a stone bowl found near Lake Titicaca. It is a religious invocation addressed to the supreme deity, praying for blessings and guidance in growing grain and herding farm animals. It is associated with archaic Amara hieroglyphic signs incorporating some cuneiform letters, and thus it is a Native American product It is not an import from abroad. And Dr. Marini holds degrees in Sumeriology, including honorary doctorates from both the U.S. and Latin American institutions, and is at present a professor at John Kennedy University in Buenos Aires. He finds the grammar and vocabulary in the letter forms of the Titicaca inscription to imply a date of about 2000 BC, and he deduces that persons who use the Sumerian language, presumably Sumerians, were present in the Altiplano at the era at that time. This important inscription is now in the Museum de la Paz, where it now may be viewed. Full details of the text appear in the succeeding volumes of the ESOP. The Tai-Pheneg alphabet, shown below, occurs in Bronze Age Norse petroglyphs, where it is used to render Old Norse words, omitting most of the vowels. A related form of Tai-Pheneg, I'm going to call this Tai-Pheneg, is used to this day by some Berber tribes in North Africa, whose ancestors may have acquired it from the Norse raiders in Bronze Age times, when Norse elements may have been included in the general term Sea Peoples. Well-known sites were such Norse inscriptions, or where such Norse inscriptions are those in Bohuslän, Sweden, where fleets of ancient ships are depicted below. In 1954, Canadian field geologists discovered a richly varied petroglyph site near Peterborough, Ontario, in which are featured ancient ships resembling those of the Scandinavian sites, interspersed with human and animal figures with numerous Tai-Pheneg letters between the pictorial elements. It was at first supposed the site had been created by the Algonquin Indian artists, though the local Indian people could throw no light on the subject matter of the carved pictures, and the archaeologists did not recognize the Tai-Pheneg letters. In 1982, in my book Bronze Age America, I deciphered the greater part of the inscriptions and showed that they are written in archaic Norse and relate to a religious, hang on here while I turn the page, a religious center established by Norse traders who were exchanging woven textiles for copper ingots supplied by the Algonquin Indians. The age of the site was estimated to be such as to place it in the Bronze Age, and astronomical details included in the inscription suggest a date for about 1700 BC. At the time, such transatlantic voyages by Scandinavians in Bronze Age vessels were unheard of, and my inferences were ridiculed by the Canadian archaeologists of Ontario. Since then, however, the Danish historian John Galster has examined the site, and his conclusions have been published in book form by the Dansk Historic Society in Copenhagen in 1987. Galster's opinion totally supports my decipherments and conclusions, and he was able to add further details from Scandinavian sites that match and support these inferences. The copper ingots supplied to the Scandinavian traders of the Peterborough site may have resembled the natural ingots shown on page 96, and they probably also included man-made hammered lumps of copper extracted by the ancient miners of Michigan. Some 5,000 abandoned mines have been found on the shores of Lake Superior. Boys and girls, did you hear that? Let me underline it. Some 5,000 abandoned copper mines have been found on the shores of Lake Superior, carbon dated by Professor Roy Dreyer of the Michigan Institute of Mining and Technology to between 2000 BC and 1000 BC, and while it appears that millions of pounds of metallic copper were extracted and cannot now be accounted for, Dreyer and his colleagues surmise that the copper must have been shipped overseas, and now the discovery of the Peterborough site seems to confirm that. For Dreyer's account of the matter, see Prehistoric Copper Mining in the Lake Superior Region by Dreyer and Du Temple, published in 1965. Now I'm going to put a bracket around that, as I was educated here in the United States of America, and I never heard a word of it. much less 5,000 ancient copper mines around Lake Superior.